So you got all the questions correct, Mark?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any questions on those questions? Do you have a presentation ready for us?
I've got a presentation in PDF format. So if we can screen share, then I can jump into that, and that would begin the introduction component, I suppose.
Absolutely. Are you the only one meeting from your group? Is it just
Yes.
you? Okay.
Just
all right. Yes. What I will do, what I'd like to ask you is to, if you can keep the timing, because since these are recorded, pre-recorded, every interview we're trying to keep them as close as possible. They're equal. I would, if you have a presentation that's about 10 minutes, if you'd like for me to let you know when you're at 7 minutes, I can do that unless you have it already timed.
If you wouldn't mind giving me a heads up, 7 or 8 minutes, that would be very helpful.
Okay.
And I will do my best to be timely in my.
I'll do that. Sorry for the restrictions. Okay. And yeah, if you want to go ahead, just share your screen. You should be able to do that.
Yes. So here we go. Let me see if I can get this to go full page, full screen mode. There we go. So I thought I would begin very briefly with just a couple of past projects to give a reminder of my work in context of all of this, to let you know why you selected me as one of the first round of finalists. So this piece is called Splash, and it went out in Oklahoma. And
sorry, Mark, let me just interrupt you. I only see a black screen right now.
Oh, you're not getting the full screen?
No, I saw the screen before when you went to to enlarge it. I only see a black screen.
Let's see if I can change that. Resume share. How about now?
It hasn't changed.
It may be a problem with full screen mode here.
Maybe.
Let me try that again. How's that?
It's there. Perfect.
Okay, great.
Now.
Sorry about that. Yeah, technology, it's great when it works.
I know.
So this piece is called Splash, and it was done for a recreation center in Oklahoma, and it is a water park and tennis club. So very, very literal idea of a tennis ball splashing in the water. One of the things that's unique about this piece is the way in which it's constructed, and it started a progression of thought for me, of using flat planes to make three-dimensional forms. And this has been evolving in my work in relation to how the engineering works, the fabrication process. So now it's not going to let me advance, goodness gracious. All right, I'm going to have to take this out of, I apologize for the difficulties.
Not to worry. It may work if you just come out of each slide and then set the next one.
What I'm trying to do is get this presentation to, here we go. I'm going to have to do this without using the full screen component on the PDF, and every one of these programs is a little bit different. So can you see the screen now?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so unfortunately we're going to have a little border around it, but that's okay. All right.
We can still see it. It's good.
So with so this shows some continued development for a private development firm that I've done a number of projects with that show this idea of this flat plane process evolving in my work. And I wanted to go through a quick description of a couple different projects to give you an idea of sort of how I problem solve and my thinking process. So this project was for the police headquarters, their new facility here in St. Petersburg, Florida. And their primary objective was to have the public art create a more welcoming space. You can imagine police headquarters are not always the most welcoming place for the public. So I do a lot of work with organic forms and the inherent math that's found in nature. And I immediately started thinking of flowers, because what's more welcoming than a flower, particularly at a police headquarters. So I did some historical research and discovered that the gladiolus shares its name with the gladiator, and that is, I believe it's Latin for sword. Anyway, so I started looking into the gladiolus and the gladiolus blossom and discovered that there were a whole bunch of historical meanings to gladiolus that shared their meaning with the primary objectives of the police department: honor, integrity, those kinds of things. So when you look at a flower, if you'll notice in the center of this flower, there's a mirror polished gold plated sphere. It's the heart of a flower. You have the pistil and the stamen, which is the essence of that flower that carries it forward generation to generation. And in this particular flower, that center form becomes a metaphor for community. The mirror polish is something that allows you, when you approach the piece, to see yourself and your surroundings reflected in it. So in essence, the petals become a metaphor for the police department and the role that it serves in the community, in that it protects and nurtures that essence of the community and allows it ultimately to be revealed to the greater world. So there's some symbology there, there's some metaphorical reference, and it's all based on historical research. And that's what I try to do with every project that I approach. Before I think of object, I try to gain as much insight into history and background and intent that the client may have. The other piece that you see, the wing there, is it's an eagle wing, and the eagle is on the badge of the police department. It's a symbol that they utilize. And I was speaking with a lawyer friend of mine who does a lot of police representation, and she mentioned to me that folks that go to the police headquarters feel vulnerable. Oftentimes they're victims of crime. And I got thinking about that in relation to this notion of wing and how that wing form can be a symbol of nurturing. And the idea of being under that wing of protection. So when you enter into this facility, that's a 30-foot long wing, and you're literally under that wing. So it creates this sort of welcoming, protective environment. So that was the intent behind the pieces here. The budget for that project was around $350,000. I'm going to show you a piece that I've got in progress right now, and it's a piece for a monument here in St. Pete. So there's a lot of historical research that's gone into this, a lot of very technical fabrication oriented, and it's in collaboration with a landscape architect, and we're developing this plaza. This piece is going to be installed at the end of this month here. So it's creating a public space. It's a very formal space, very dignified space that deals with this historic first flight, which St. Petersburg is the home for the first commercial aviation flight. And this is a full-scale stainless steel replica of that airplane. So there's a lot of historical components in this piece. This is the fuselage in fabrication. We've just finished it up in the studio. And this is the wing segment that is complete, and that's the exterior of my facility. So a lot of technical work involved in this, and historic work associated with the development of this project. I've been working with the First Flight not-for-profit team for over 5 years on the development of this project. So a lot of legwork goes into this kind of thing. Here's some shots, a close-up and the waveform, so that as you can see that there's a pylon underneath this airplane, so it sits up about 10 feet off the ground, so it stays out of the publicly accessible zone, and that waveform clads the base pylon. So this is another piece that I've got in production right now, and I thought that I would include this to give you an idea of how these things develop with my process. And I do all my own fabrication, and I've got a team of about 10 artists that work with me, from office work up front to my design team through fabrication. We do installation as well. And I also work with a structural engineer, and I've got a general contractor and a landscape architect that I bring in on various projects as well. So a project like this, I was hired to create a concept for Indian Shores, which is a community in the outlying areas of Pinellas County. And they have penny for Pinellas funds associated with the redevelopment of a portion of their beachfront. And they have an Indian that is their logo. And this piece is called The Guardian, and it was a large scale piece. This is an initial concept sketch that was generated. Here it is from a different view. This is a park area. It's smaller than the space that we're looking at for this particular project, but it's got a variety of components, which is why I thought it was appropriate. And we did first some initial concept sketches, just simple pencil drawings, and there's informational placards and walkway and seating area, plantings that are all part of this process. Now this shows three-dimensional renderings and further development of those pieces. And the concept here was to take copper and coral, cut it into coral forms, and then hand form that into that portrait that I had showed you drawn. And here we see it from another view in its environment. These are the kind of renderings that we would generate for our finished space. So here's our pencil drawing of our plan view of the entire space. The main sculpture is there on the left, and you can see the pathway and the plantings. And then on the right is an in-ground sculptural component. And here we have it all rendered out further. After an initial concept approval, then we put some more time into it and render that full space out. So a little insight into how we develop idea. And,
sorry to interrupt, just wanted to let you know you have another 2 more minutes. 2 minutes left.
Great.
Time. Thank you.
Perfect timing. I'm just wrapping up. So this gives you an idea of sort of how we would approach this particular project. We've got some nice space to work with, but for the overall square footage, we do need to be very efficient with the use of materials. One thing about the way that I am making sculpture currently is that with flat planes, we can be very efficient with our production process, and our use of materials is very cost effective. So we can get a lot of visual impact with the dollars that are spent through fabrication. So that brings me to the conclusion. I can send this PDF forward if that's helpful. But from this point, I know we've got a couple questions that you'd like to address.
Yes, that's correct. Would you like for me? I'm going to read them one at a time so you can take your time. You can answer them as I read them. All right, let's see. How will you maximize the artistic impact on the site with a limited budget and restrictions? And I'm aware also that you may have responded some of the questions on the presentation, but let's just go through them anyway, please. Thank
Absolutely. You. So as I had mentioned, making three-dimensional objects with flat planes is a very efficient way to produce dimensional objects. I can make very, very stable forms from an engineering perspective. And I'm using fabrication processes which are widely utilized in the industrial fabrication process. So I use a lot of water jet cutting. We've got an on-site water jet that handles large scale materials, and it's very efficient. And the sheet goods or plate material that I utilize is very cost effective as compared to like casting and the other more fine art oriented or traditionally fine art oriented processes. So it's very efficient in that respect. I would definitely want to utilize some smaller components, possibly sculptural elements as ballards to create a coherent theme for the entire space with a a centralized vertical sculptural element as a focal point, possibly some earthwork around that to create a more intimate space. And then I like the idea of a shade structure that's sculpturally oriented for a seating area that could create a sort of a small plaza space where some outdoor activities could be planned, or that space could be utilized for anything from yoga, as I saw in your presentation, to speaking opportunities, and trying to keep people from spending too much time there. You know, some practical things of creating benches that are good for seating but not for lying down, and those kinds of things would be incorporated into that consideration set.
Very good. All right, the next question is in regards to the safety of Courthouse Plaza users from potential incidents of violence. You know, being the courthouse, there will be, it could be dangerous to have areas where people can hide, or, so how would you incorporate, what specific measures would you incorporate it to enhance the safety of users and to avoid hidden corners and hiding places?
Well, one of the things that's very fortunate about the process that I've utilized for making sculpture, this use of flat planes, is that there's a lot of open space in the pieces. And from a conceptual standpoint, I'm very interested in how much information is necessary in an object for the eye to actually be able to visualize form. And there's some really interesting conceptual components of that and structural components, but it also creates a certain amount of openness or airiness to the object. So I'd be very sensitive to the concerns of safety and the openness of the pieces. Everything is soft and finished off, so we don't have physical harm concerns for public engagement, but also illumination is very critical. And lighting is always an integral part of the pieces that I develop. So between the openness of the pieces and the way that the spaces are laid out, and then the illumination of the pieces, I think we can achieve a very effective, very dignified, and very safe sculptural environment.
Okay, now the next one. Given COVID, how do you propose to engage with the community and respond artistically to the community needs, identity, and aspirations? And what do you know?
Yes, and what would I need from you?
To help that process.
You know, I've got a number of projects that we're engaged in right now. MGA is capable of handling more than one project at a time. And I'm working on a piece up in Charlotte, and they have a public engagement component. And COVID, of course, has forced some new ways of approaching these kinds of consideration sets. So I do find Zoom and other internet-based meeting resources to be very efficient. And that would be very, very helpful. You know, I would want to come up and take a look at the space personally, but for the public engagement, I think that the format that we're using right now is very effective. What I would need from your team would be help in coordinating public events and also marketing those events. So, you know, we could schedule times and then advertise to the public that this process would be happening and create open meeting formats for that. I do know through some of the other municipal projects that I have that there are different formats that Zoom can utilize where you can have people engaged, but they don't actually have access to the interface of the meeting, short of raising their hand and being engaged. So,
okay, all right. The Culture Council has adopted a policy around diversity, equity, and inclusion as follows. The Culture Council of Greater Jacksonville commits to championing policies and practices of cultural equity that empower a just, inclusive, and equitable city. How will you and your team incorporate this into your planning, designing, and artistic approach to the Courthouse Plaza?
Okay, so with a large-scale project like this, there would inevitably be subcontractors involved. I would be putting the architectural components and the general contracting components together. Fortunately, I'm fairly close to you, and I do appreciate you making a Florida-based artist one of your finalists. But we would, I would look to your references for subcontracting services to help with the site preparation and some of the different components that would be involved in the construction aspect, the general contracting aspect of the project. So there's an opportunity there to use minority-based or partially minority-based businesses. So I would hope that I could get a reference from the city components to help facilitate that. I also, I'd like to mention that I'm engaged in a project here, and this probably goes to your last question. Mm-hmm. I'm the board chair for the Warehouse Arts District Association, which is a not-for-profit that is a community-based arts sustainability program. And we have used our 501c3 to purchase about 3 acres in a industrial part of the city of St. Petersburg. And we're building out or revitalizing this portion of the community to create sustainability for the arts community. And it's also, the project functions very much as a community redevelopment project. And it sits right on the division between what was traditionally, during segregation times, the African-American community and the rest of the city of St. Petersburg. And I'm not from here. I've been here about 15 years. So I've sort of come into this whole environment, and it's been a huge education to learn how to work with this project of integration and equity. And it's something that I'm very sensitive to, is why I bring it up.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Mark. I think we have everything covered, and we did really well with time, perfect timing. So thank you so much.
Yes, well, I really appreciate the opportunity, and best of luck to your team in making the selection.
We will, and we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
All right, bye now.